Hello everyone and welcome back. In our previous lesson, we learned about figuring out how to form the constraints for this question. In this lesson, we're going to come up with some test cases as well as the expected answer our solution should produce for the given array. So the first thing we have to actually identify is what is the best test case? So here let's just think of an array where it's really obvious what the answer for us will be. So if I put 7, 1, 2, 3, and then 9, we know for certain that we need to use these two values in order to form our container. They're the greatest and they're the furthest apart. So we know that the area calculation is length times width. And we know that from our evaluation of the question, the length is going to be from the smaller of these two elements. So here, length will be 7. Because if we use 9, well, as we remember, our container would look something like this being the 9, this being the 7. If water were to fill and any more were to come in, the water would simply spill out. So that's why we use the 7. But what about figuring out the width, which is the distance between these two elements? How do we get this value? Well, this is easy by just subtracting the indices. So here, if this is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, we simply subtract 4 from 0, which gives us the distance. And we can justify this if we look at this on our chart. If we drew this out, this is a little bit too high. We can tell that there is a space of 4 units between the 7 and the 9. So using this index calculation, we can now figure out the width between our two walls. So once we have this value, we know that what we're expecting is 28, 7 times 4. Now let's think of some other test cases that we can have to make sure our solution covers. One might be that if we have an empty array, we want the max area returned to be 0. Another is that if we have an array of one value, we also want a max array of 0. So in both of these cases, no container can be formed because as we know from our constraints, we can only form a container if there are 2 elements in the array. So both of these cases, we have to return 0 because there's no max area computed. Let's come up with one more example. Let's come up with an array where it's not as obvious what the correct answer is. So let's say we had 6, 9, 3, 4, 5, and 8. Here, we don't know if the correct answer is the 6 and the 8 or the 9 and the 8. But as we know, we can calculate the max area to figure it out. So let's take our numbers, 8 and 6. We take the lesser of the two as the length, and then we need the width. And the width calculation we get from the indices. So let's just say that for this one, it's 5 minus 0. So that gives us 5. And this gives us an area of 30. But what about these purple values, 9 and 8? So first we take the lesser of the two, which is 8. And then we get the distance, which is 5 minus 1, which gives us 4. And 8 times 4 gives us 32. So it's actually the 9 and the 8 that is the correct answer. So this is just something we have to keep in mind as a good test case to make sure that our solution will probably cover, but also that when we're thinking about our solution before we even write any code, that we account for this as part of our logical steps. And now that we have our test cases, let's think about a logical solution before we write any code at all.